The accusation hit Clara Hartwell like a physical blow the moment she stepped into the barn that October morning in 1883. The Wyoming Territory sun barely cresting the horizon as ranch foreman Dutch Morrison pointed his gnarled finger at her and declared she had left the south pasture gate open, allowing nearly 200 head of cattle to scatter across 3 neighboring properties during the night. She stood frozen in the doorway, her work dress still damp from the morning dew, her hands clutching the empty milk pails she had been carrying from the dairy shed. The words did not make sense at first. She had checked that gate herself yesterday evening, the same way she checked it every evening for the past 6 months since her father had died and left her this struggling ranch with more debts than livestock. She remembered the feel of the heavy chain in her hands, the satisfying click of the lock sliding into place, the way she had tugged on it twice to make certain it held fast. "That is not true," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "I locked that gate myself. I always lock it." Dutch Morrison crossed his thick arms over his barrel chest, his weathered face set in hard lines. Behind him stood 3 of the ranch hands, men who had worked for her father and now regarded her with barely concealed skepticism. A woman running a ranch was unusual enough in this territory. A woman who could not keep cattle contained was grounds for dismissal in their eyes, even if she technically owned the property. "Gate was wide open when young Billy found it at dawn," Dutch said flatly. "Cattle everywhere, trampled through the Henderson place, knocked down fences at the McCready farm, scattered God knows where else. You were the last one in that pasture yesterday. Everyone here knows it." Clara felt heat rising in her cheeks, part anger and part humiliation. She had fought so hard these past months to prove herself capable, to show these men and the neighboring ranchers that she could manage this land her father had loved. One mistake, one moment of carelessness, could destroy everything she had built. Except, she had not been careless. She knew with absolute certainty that she had secured that gate. "I locked it," she repeated, meeting Dutch's eyes directly. "Someone else must have opened it during the night." "And who would do that?" Dutch scoffed. "You accusing one of us?" She was not accusing anyone specifically, but the idea had already taken root. Why would the gate be open unless someone had deliberately opened it? Yet voicing such a suspicion would only make things worse. These men already resented taking orders from her. Accusing them of sabotage would push them past the point of tolerating her authority. Before she could respond, the sound of hoofbeats drew everyone's attention to the yard outside. Clara turned to see a rider approaching on a rangy buckskin horse, moving at an easy lope that suggested both confidence and long hours in the saddle. She recognized him immediately, though they had never formally met. Jackson Cole, the cowboy who worked the neighboring Rocking M Ranch, a man with a reputation for being quiet, capable, and utterly reliable. She had seen him in town a few times, noticed the way he tipped his hat to ladies and paid his bills without complaint, but they had never exchanged more than polite nods. He was tall, she noticed as he dismounted, with dark hair that curled slightly beneath his worn Stetson and eyes the color of creek water in summer. He moved with the easy grace of someone completely comfortable in his own skin, his worn leather vest and faded blue shirt marking him as a working cowboy rather than a ranch owner. He could not have been much older than she was, perhaps 25 to her 22 years. "Morning," he said, touching the brim of his hat as he approached. His gaze moved from Dutch to Clara and back again, assessing the tension with the quick intelligence of someone accustomed to reading situations. "Heard you folks had some trouble last night. Some of your cattle wandered onto Rocking M land. My boss sent me to let you know we have got them penned up in our east corral. Figured you would want to collect them soon as possible." Dutch grunted. "Appreciate that, Cole. We will get them back where they belong once we round up the rest. Miss Hartwell here left the gate open last night, so we are dealing with a mess." Clara watched Jackson Cole's expression carefully. She saw his eyes flick to her, saw something shift in his gaze. Not judgment exactly, more like curiosity. "That so?" he said slowly. "Which gate?" "South pasture," Dutch said. "She was the last one there yesterday evening." Jackson nodded thoughtfully, his fingers absently stroking the neck of his horse. "I rode past that section of your property around midnight last night. Was checking on some strays of our own that had been acting skittish. Could not see much in the dark, but I heard cattle moving. Seemed like a lot of noise for animals that should have been settled for the night." Clara's heart leaped. "You were out there at midnight?" "Yes, ma'am." His eyes met hers directly, and she saw something in them that made her breath catch. Belief. He believed her. She could see it in the way he looked at her, without the dismissiveness that had become so familiar from the other men. And I will tell you something else. When I rode back past that way about an hour later, I heard a horse, single rider, moving fast away from this direction. Struck me as odd at the time, someone riding hard in the middle of the night like that, but I figured it was not my business. Dutch frowned. Could have been anyone. Could have been one of our own hands. Could have been, Jackson agreed mildly. But seems to me if Miss Hartwell says she locked that gate, might be worth taking a closer look before placing blame. Gate chains do not usually unlock themselves. The simple statement, delivered without heat or accusation, seemed to carry more weight than all of Clara's protests combined. She saw Dutch shift his weight, saw doubt creep into his expression. The other hands exchanged glances. Well, Dutch said slowly, suppose it would not hurt to examine the gate itself, see if there are any signs of tampering. I would be happy to ride along, Jackson offered, if Miss Hartwell does not object. Sometimes a fresh set of eyes can spot things that get missed in the heat of the moment. Clara found her voice, though her heart was still pounding with a mixture of relief and something else she could not quite name. I would appreciate that, Mr. Cole. Thank you. He smiled at her then, a slow, warm smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes and made something flutter in her chest. Just Jackson, ma'am, and it is no trouble at all. Within 20 minutes, a small group had assembled to ride out to the south pasture. Clara saddled her father's old mare, a steady bay named Rosie, who had seen better days but still had heart. Jackson rode beside her, his buckskin matching Rosie's pace with the easy companionship of horses accustomed to working together. Dutch and two hands, Billy and Tom, followed behind, their skepticism evident in their silence. The morning had warmed considerably by the time they reached the south pasture fence line. The gate hung open, swaying slightly in the breeze, the chain that should have secured it lying in the dust. Clara dismounted and walked to the gate, her stomach tight with apprehension. She had been so certain she had locked it. Had she somehow been mistaken? The doubt crept in despite her certainty, whispering that perhaps she had been distracted, perhaps she had not actually secured the lock after all. Jackson dismounted beside her and crouched down near the chain. He did not touch it immediately, just studied it with the intense focus of someone reading a story in the dirt and metal. After a long moment, he picked up the chain and examined the lock itself. This lock has been picked, he said quietly. Clara felt her knees go weak with relief. Are you certain? He held it up so she could see, pointing to small scratches around the keyhole. See these marks? Fresh scratches, probably made last night. Someone worked at this lock with something thin and metal. Took them a few tries, judging by the number of marks. But they got it open eventually. Dutch leaned over to look, his expression shifting from skepticism to concern. Well, I will be damned. Who would do such a thing? Someone who wanted to cause problems for Miss Hartwell, Jackson said, his voice hardening slightly. Someone who knew she would be blamed when the cattle got out. The implications hung heavy in the air. Clara looked around at the hands, trying to read their faces. Billy, barely 18 with a shock of red hair and freckles, looked genuinely shocked. Tom, older and more weather-beaten, seemed puzzled. Dutch just looked angry, but she could not tell if that anger was directed at her or at the unknown saboteur. Let us look around, Jackson suggested. See if whoever did this left any other signs. They spread out, searching the area around the gate. It was Jackson who found the first real clue, a set of boot prints in the soft earth near the fence post. He called Clara over, and she studied the prints carefully. They were distinct, with an unusual pattern on the sole, almost like a diamond shape repeated across the heel and toe. Anyone you know wear boots with soles like that? Jackson asked. Clara shook her head, but Dutch had come over to look, and she saw recognition flash across his face. He tried to hide it, but not quickly enough. You know whose prints these are, Clara said. It was not a question. Dutch hesitated, clearly wrestling with some internal conflict. Finally, he sighed heavily. Could be Carl Brennan's boots. He has got a pair with soles like that. Ordered them special from a cobbler in Cheyenne last spring. Was right proud of them. Clara felt her stomach drop. Carl Brennan was one of the hands who had worked for her father for years. He was older, in his 40s, and had been vocal in his displeasure when Clara had taken over the ranch. He had made several comments about women not being suited to ranch work, about how her father would be ashamed to see his daughter trying to do a man's job. But she had never thought he would actively sabotage her. "Where is Carl this morning?" she asked, proud that her voice remained steady. "He rode out early," Billy volunteered. "Said he was going into town for supplies. Left before dawn." Jackson and Clara exchanged glances. "Convenient timing," Jackson said. "Lets the cattle out, then makes himself scarce while everyone else deals with the mess." "We do not know for certain it was him," Dutch said, but his voice lacked conviction. "These could be anyone's boot prints." "They could be," Jackson agreed, "but seems like it would be easy enough to check. See if Carl's boots match these prints. See if he has got scratches on any thin metal tools, like a knife blade or a wire. Someone who picked that lock probably damaged whatever they used to do it." Clara made a decision. "Dutch, send someone to town to find Carl. Bring him back here. I want to talk to him directly." Dutch looked like he wanted to argue, but the evidence was too clear. He nodded reluctantly and sent Tom riding back toward the ranch to fetch another hand to make the trip to town. With the immediate crisis of the gate investigation concluded, attention turned to the more pressing problem of gathering the scattered cattle. Jackson offered to help, and Clara accepted gratefully. They needed every hand they could get, and besides, she found his presence oddly comforting. He did not treat her like a foolish woman or an incompetent rancher. He treated her like a partner, an equal, someone whose word carried weight. They spent the rest of the morning riding through the neighboring properties, apologizing to frustrated farmers and ranchers, and driving cattle back toward the Hartwell ranch. It was hot, dusty work, and by noon, Clara's dress was streaked with dirt, and her hair had come loose from its pins. She must have looked a disaster, but Jackson never seemed to notice or care. He worked alongside her with quiet efficiency, anticipating her moves and backing her up when a stubborn steer decided to make a break for freedom. During a brief break to water the horses at a creek that ran between the Hartwell and Henderson properties, Jackson finally spoke beyond the necessary communications about the cattle. "You are handling this well," he said, leaning against a cottonwood tree with his hat pushed back on his head. "A lot of folks would have crumbled under the pressure." Clara splashed cool water on her face, grateful for the momentary relief from the heat. "I do not have the luxury of crumbling. This ranch is all I have left of my father. If I lose it, I lose everything." "Your father was Samuel Hartwell, right? I met him a few times. Good man." "Fair dealer." "He was," Clara said softly. The grief was still fresh, even 6 months later. Her father had been thrown from a horse during a storm, had broken his back, and lingered for 3 agonizing days before the fever took him. She had held his hand at the end, had promised him she would keep the ranch running, would not let his life's work disappear. It was a promise that grew heavier with each passing day. "He would be proud of you," Jackson said. "Takes real strength to do what you were doing. Running a ranch is hard enough for anyone. Doing it alone, as a woman in this territory, that takes something special." Clara felt unexpected tears prick her eyes. No one had said anything like that to her since her father died. Everyone else had either pitied her or doubted her. Jackson's simple affirmation felt like water in a desert. "Thank you," she managed. "That means more than you know." He smiled at her, and again she felt that flutter in her chest, that sense of connection she had not experienced with anyone else. There was something about Jackson Cole that made her feel seen, truly seen, in a way she had not felt in a long time. They returned to gathering cattle, working through the afternoon heat. By evening, they had recovered most of the herd, though a few stragglers were still missing. Clara's body ached with exhaustion, but she felt a grim satisfaction in the work accomplished. They had corralled the cattle back in the south pasture, this time with additional chains and 2 men stationed to guard the gate through the night. As the sun began to set, painting the Wyoming sky in shades of orange and purple, Jackson prepared to ride back to the rocking M. Clara walked him to his horse, suddenly reluctant to see him go. "Thank you for everything today," she said. "You did not have to help, but I am grateful you did." "I was happy to help," he said, and the sincerity in his voice made her believe him. "And I hope you get to the bottom of this situation with Carl Brennan. No one deserves to be sabotaged like that." "If it was him," Clara said, "we still do not have proof." "True enough, but my offer stands. If you need anything, anything at all, the Rocking M is just a few miles north. I am usually around, and I am always willing to lend a hand to a neighbor." He mounted his buckskin with easy grace, settling into the saddle like he belonged there. Clara watched him, memorizing the lines of his silhouette against the darkening sky, the confident set of his shoulders, the gentle way he handled his horse. "Good night, Jackson," she said softly. "Good night, Clara," he replied, and the sound of her name in his voice sent warmth spreading through her chest. She watched him ride away until he disappeared over the rise, then turned back toward the ranch house with a strange mixture of emotions swirling through her. The day had been difficult, frustrating, and exhausting. But it had also brought Jackson Cole into her life, and that felt like something significant, though she was not quite ready to examine why. The ranch hand Tom returned just before full dark with news that Carl Brennan had been located in town, but had refused to come back voluntarily. He had taken a room at the boarding house and declared he was quitting the Hartwell Ranch effective immediately. The news did not surprise Clara, but it did complicate things. If Carl had sabotaged the gate, he was now beyond her reach, at least temporarily. She could bring the matter to the sheriff, but without concrete proof beyond suspicious boot prints, she doubted much would come of it. That night, Clara lay in her narrow bed in the ranch house that felt too big and empty without her father's presence. She stared at the ceiling, her mind replaying the events of the day, the accusation, the investigation. The relief of discovering the lock had been picked, and through it all, Jackson Cole's steady presence, his belief in her when everyone else had been ready to condemn her as careless. She thought about the way he had looked at her, the warmth in his eyes, the respect in his voice. She thought about the way her heart had jumped when he smiled. It had been a long time since she had thought about romance or companionship. After her father's death, survival had consumed all her energy. But Jackson had awakened something in her, some part of herself she had thought buried under grief and responsibility. Sleep was slow to come, and when it finally did, her dreams were filled with creekwater eyes and a slow, warm smile. The next morning dawned clear and cold, the first real bite of autumn in the air. Clara dressed in her work clothes and headed out to check on the cattle, half expecting to find some new disaster awaiting her. But the herd was secure. The guards reported a quiet night, and for the first time in days, Clara felt like she could breathe properly. She was mucking out the barn when she heard hoofbeats in the yard. Her heart leaped hopefully before she could stop it, and sure enough, when she looked up, Jackson Cole was riding through the gate on his buckskin. He dismounted and walked toward her, and she was suddenly acutely aware of how she must look, sweaty and dirty in her oldest dress, with her hair tied back in a hasty braid. But Jackson just smiled at her like she was the prettiest thing he had ever seen. "Morning," he said. "I hope I'm not intruding. I wanted to check on how things went with Carl Brennan." Clara leaned her pitchfork against the barn wall and wiped her hands on her apron. "He has quit the ranch and refuses to come back. Tom found him in town last night." Jackson frowned. "That is mighty suspicious behavior. Guilty conscience, maybe. That is what I think, but I cannot prove anything, and without proof, the sheriff will not do anything." "What if we could find proof?" Jackson said slowly. "I have been thinking about this all night. Carl Brennan opened that gate for a reason. Could be he just wanted to cause you trouble, make you look bad. But it could also be he was working for someone else, someone who would benefit from you losing your ranch." Clara had not thought of that angle, but it made a terrible kind of sense. "You think someone put him up to it?" "Could be. Who would want to see you fail? Who would benefit from you having to sell the Hartwell Ranch?" Clara thought hard. There were several neighbors who had made offers to buy her land after her father died, offers she had refused. The most persistent had been Silas McCready, who owned the large spread to the east. He had been trying to expand his holdings for years, and the Hartwell Ranch sat right in the middle of the territory he wanted to control. He had not been pleased when Clara turned down his offers, had made some pointed comments about stubborn women not knowing what was good for them. "Silas McCready," she said. "He wants my land, has wanted it for years." Jackson nodded thoughtfully. "I know McCready. He has got a reputation for being ruthless. Not much he would not do to get what he wants. And I seem to recall Carl Brennan has a brother who works on the McCready Ranch." The pieces clicked together in Clara's mind. Carl's brother Jake was McCready's foreman. If Silas McCready had wanted to sabotage her ranch, Jake would have been the perfect intermediary, and Carl would have had both the opportunity and the family loyalty to carry out the plan. "But how do we prove it?" Clara asked, frustration sharpening her voice. "Even if we are right, McCready is not going to confess, and neither will Carl or Jake." Jackson was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. What if Carl does not know that McCready has no intention of protecting him? What if Carl thinks he's going to be taken care of, given a job on the McCready ranch, maybe paid well for his trouble? Men like that get cocky, they get careless. And if someone was to approach Carl, maybe in a saloon when he has had a few drinks, and hint that McCready was not planning to hold up his end of the bargain, well, a man in that situation might get angry, might say things he would not otherwise say. Clara stared at him. That is actually brilliant. It is risky, Jackson cautioned, and it depends on Carl being drunk enough to be careless, but not so drunk he cannot talk coherently. Plus, someone would have to get him talking, and it cannot be you or anyone from your ranch. He would be immediately suspicious. But you could do it, Clara said. You do not work for me. You have no obvious connection to this situation. If you happened to be in the saloon and struck up a conversation, bought him a few drinks, commiserated about difficult bosses, he might let something slip. Jackson grinned. I was thinking the same thing. It is worth a try, at least. Worst case, we waste an evening and a few dollars on whiskey. Best case, we get Carl to admit what he did and who put him up to it. When? Clara asked, energy and hope surging through her. Tonight. Give Carl one more day to settle in town, to feel safe and comfortable. Then I will go have a friendly drink with him and see what shakes loose. Clara wanted to hug him. She wanted to throw her arms around his neck and thank him for believing in her, for helping her when he had no obligation to do so. But that would be wildly inappropriate, so she settled for reaching out and touching his hand where it rested on his belt. Thank you, Jackson. I do not know why you are helping me, but I am more grateful than I can say. His hand turned under hers, his fingers curling around hers in a warm, firm grip. The touch sent electricity up her arm, and when she looked up and met his eyes, she saw her own feelings reflected there. Interest, attraction, something deeper that neither of them was quite ready to name. I am helping you because what happened to you was wrong, he said quietly. And because I have got a feeling you and I are going to be good friends, Clara Hartwell. Maybe more than friends, if you are open to the possibility. Her breath caught. He had said it, put words to the connection that had been humming between them since yesterday morning. And now she had to decide how to respond, whether to acknowledge the attraction or to retreat into propriety and caution. She thought about the lonely months since her father's death, the isolation of running the ranch alone, the constant battle to prove herself. She thought about Jackson's steady presence, his respect, his warmth. She thought about how alive she felt when he looked at her. I am open to the possibility, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. His smile was like the sun coming out from behind clouds. He squeezed her hand gently, then reluctantly released it. Good. That is real good. But first, let us deal with Carl Brennan and whoever put him up to this. Then we can talk about other things. Clara agreed, though part of her wanted to forget about Carl and McCready and everything else and just stand here holding Jackson's hand. But responsibility called, as it always did. There would be time for personal matters once the ranch was secure. Jackson left shortly after, needing to get back to his own work at the Rocking M. Clara watched him ride away again, and this time the ache of his departure was sharper, sweeter, edged with anticipation of seeing him again soon. The day passed with agonizing slowness. Clara threw herself into ranch work, repairing fences, checking on the cattle, reviewing the account books that showed just how precarious her financial situation truly was. She needed this matter with the cattle resolved quickly. Every day of disruption cost her money and reputation she could not afford to lose. By evening, she was exhausted but too anxious to rest. She kept imagining Jackson in the saloon, trying to get information from Carl Brennan. What if it went wrong? What if Carl became suspicious or violent? What if McCready had people watching Carl, ready to silence him if he talked too much? She tried to read, but the words blurred on the page. She tried to do mending, but her stitches were uneven and sloppy. Finally, she gave up and just sat on the porch, watching the stars come out and praying that Jackson would be safe. It was nearly midnight when she heard hoofbeats approaching. She jumped to her feet, her heart pounding, and was relieved beyond measure to see Jackson riding into the yard. Even in the moonlight, she could see the satisfaction on his face. You got something, she said as he dismounted. I got everything, he replied, his voice rich with triumph. Carl Brennan sang like a canary once I got enough whiskey in him. He is furious at Silas McCready because McCready promised him a foreman position, and a bonus if he caused enough trouble to force you to sell. But now McCready is refusing to hire him, says it is too suspicious to bring Carl on right after he quit your ranch. Carl feels used and betrayed, and he was more than happy to tell me all about it. Clara felt vindication surge through her. Did he admit to opening the gate? He did. Bragged about how easy the lock was to pick, how you never suspected a thing. He also said there were plans for more sabotage if the cattle incident did not work. McCready wants your ranch badly enough to play dirty to get it. Did anyone else hear Carl's confession? The bartender heard some of it, and I made sure to be loud and friendly, asking questions where other patrons could hear the answers. There are at least 4 witnesses who heard Carl admit to sabotaging your ranch on McCready's orders. Clara could have wept with relief. That is enough to take to the sheriff. I think so, and I think McCready is going to have some uncomfortable questions to answer. Men like him do not like being caught out in illegal schemes. Will you come with me tomorrow to talk to the sheriff? Jackson did not hesitate. Of course, we will go first thing in the morning. She stepped closer to him, close enough to smell the faint scent of whiskey and smoke that clung to his clothes from the saloon, close enough to see the stubble shadowing his jaw. I do not know how to thank you. You do not need to thank me. I told you, Clara. We are friends, maybe more than friends, and friends help each other. More than friends, she repeated softly, testing the words. I like the sound of that. He reached up and gently tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. The touch was tender, almost reverent, and Clara felt her eyes flutter closed at the simple intimacy of it. I know this is fast, Jackson said quietly. I know we have only known each other 2 days, but I feel something with you that I have never felt with anyone else. Like I have been waiting for you my whole life without knowing it. Clara opened her eyes and looked at him, this man who had ridden into her life at the exact moment she needed him most. I feel it too. It terrifies me and thrills me in equal measure. We have got time to figure it out, he said. No need to rush, but I want you to know my intentions are serious. I am not playing games here. Neither am I, Clara said firmly. He smiled, that slow, warm smile that made her heart race, and leaned down to press a gentle kiss to her forehead. It was chaste, respectful, exactly appropriate for a man courting a woman with honorable intentions. But it still sent heat flooding through Clara's body, still made her want to pull him closer and find out what his lips would feel like against hers. But Jackson was right. They had time, and there were still practical matters to address before they could fully explore the feelings growing between them. Get some rest, Jackson said, stepping back reluctantly. Tomorrow, we talk to the sheriff and set things right. Then we can focus on other things. Clara nodded, not trusting her voice. She watched him mount his horse, watched him ride away into the night. And this time, the ache of his leaving was tempered by the knowledge that he would be back in the morning, that this was not an ending, but a beginning. She slept better that night than she had in months. True to his word, Jackson arrived at the Hartwell ranch just after dawn. Clara had dressed in her best day dress, a deep blue cotton that had been her mother's, and pinned her hair up neatly. If they were going to confront the sheriff and potentially Silas McCready, she wanted to look respectable and confident, not like a struggling rancher barely holding things together. Jackson noticed the dress immediately. She saw his eyes light up with appreciation, saw the way his gaze lingered on her face and figure in a way that made her blush. You look beautiful, he said simply. Thank you. I wanted to look presentable. You always look presentable, but today you look more than that. You look like a woman who knows her worth and is not going to let anyone take advantage of her. His words bolstered her confidence as they rode together into town. The morning was crisp and clear, perfect autumn weather, and Clara felt a sense of rightness about everything that was happening. The truth was going to come out. Justice would be served, and she had Jackson beside her, solid and supportive and wonderful. The sheriff's office was a small wooden building on the main street of Clearwater, the closest town to the Hartwell ranch. Sheriff Tom Bridger was a middle-aged man with a drooping mustache and a reputation for fairness, though he tended to be cautious about taking sides in disputes between prominent citizens. He looked up from his desk when Clara and Jackson entered, his expression shifting from mild interest to concern as he registered Clara's serious demeanor. Miss Hartwell, he said, standing politely. "What can I do for you?" Clara laid out the entire story, starting with the accusation about the open gate and ending with Carl Brennan's drunken confession the previous night. Jackson corroborated everything, adding details about the witnesses at the saloon. Sheriff Bridger listened carefully, his expression growing grimmer as the tale unfolded. "These are serious accusations," he said when Clara finished. "Sabotage, conspiracy to defraud, potentially criminal trespass. If what you are saying is true, both Carl Brennan and Silas McCready could face charges." "It is true," Clara said firmly, "and I want justice. I want everyone to know that I did not leave that gate open through carelessness. I want my reputation restored." Sheriff Bridger nodded slowly. "I will need to talk to Carl Brennan directly, and to the witnesses at the saloon. If their statements corroborate what you have told me, I will have grounds to bring charges." "What about McCready?" Jackson asked. "Are you going to question him?" "I will. But understand, McCready is a powerful man in this territory. If he denies everything and Carl recants his statement, this could get complicated." "Then we had better make sure Carl does not recant," Jackson said. "What if we convince him that cooperating with you is his best chance of avoiding serious jail time? He is angry at McCready anyway. He might be willing to testify against him in exchange for a lighter sentence." Sheriff Bridger looked at Jackson with new respect. "That is not a bad idea. Let me talk to Carl first, see where his head is at. You two should go about your business. I will send word when I have more information." It was not the immediate vindication Clara had hoped for, but it was progress. She and Jackson left the sheriff's office and stood on the wooden sidewalk, the morning sun warming their faces. "What now?" Clara asked. "Now we wait," Jackson said. "And while we wait, maybe I could buy you breakfast. There is a decent restaurant just down the street." Clara realized she had been too nervous to eat much before leaving the ranch. The idea of sitting down to a proper meal with Jackson, in public where people could see them together, felt both exciting and slightly scandalous. A meal together would make their relationship public, would announce to the whole town that they were courting. "I would like that," she said. They walked together to the restaurant, a cheerful establishment called Maggie's Place that served the best biscuits and gravy in the territory. The owner, Maggie herself, was a plump, friendly woman who beamed at them as they entered. "Jackson Cole, as I live and breathe," she said warmly. "And Miss Clara Hartwell. What a lovely surprise. Table for two." "Please," Jackson said, and Clara heard the pride in his voice, the pleasure of being seen with her. They settled at a table by the window, and Maggie brought them coffee and took their orders. Clara felt hyper-aware of everything, the way Jackson's knee almost touched hers under the table, the warmth of his gaze, the interested looks from other diners who were clearly noting their presence together. "People are staring," Clara murmured. "Let them," Jackson said easily. "I am not ashamed to be seen with you. Are you ashamed to be seen with me?" "Of course not. I just do not want to damage your reputation by association. Mine is already under suspicion. Your reputation is going to be just fine once Sheriff Bridger sorts this out. And as for mine, it can only improve by being associated with a beautiful, intelligent, capable woman." Clara felt herself blushing again. She was not accustomed to such open admiration. Her father had loved her, but he had not been effusive with praise. The ranch hands certainly never complimented her. Jackson's straightforward appreciation felt like water on parched ground, nourishing something in her that had been starved for affection. "You are very good with words," she said softly. "I am only speaking the truth. Clara, I want to be clear about something. I know we have not known each other long, but I am a man who knows his own mind. I am interested in courting you properly. I want to spend time with you, get to know you better, and see where this goes. But I want you to know up front that my intentions are serious. I am not looking for a casual flirtation." Clara's heart pounded. "What are you looking for?" "Eventually, a wife, a partner, someone to build a life with. I am not saying that has to be you, not yet. We need time to figure out if we suit each other, but I want you to know that I am at a place in my life where I am ready for something permanent. If that is not what you want, if you are not interested in that kind of future, I need to know now before we both get hurt." Clara appreciated his honesty, even as it made her pulse race with a mixture of excitement and fear. "I do want those things, eventually. But Jackson, my situation is complicated. I have got a ranch to run, debts to pay, responsibilities I cannot just walk away from. Any man who courts me has to understand that I am not just a woman. I am a rancher. That is part of who I am." "I know that," Jackson said gently. "And I would never ask you to give up the ranch. Your father's legacy is important to you. I understand that. But Clara, you do not have to carry that burden alone. A good marriage is a partnership. Two people working together, supporting each other. I have got skills and experience that could help you with the ranch. And you have got determination and intelligence that I admire. Together, we could make something really strong." The picture he painted was so appealing, it almost hurt. Clara had been alone for so long, struggling under the weight of responsibilities too heavy for one person. The idea of sharing that burden, of having someone to lean on and work alongside, was almost too good to be true. "You barely know me," she said, though her objection was weak even to her own ears. "Then let me get to know you better. That is what courting is for." Their food arrived then, interrupting the intense conversation. They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes, and Clara found herself relaxing into the moment. It felt good, sitting here with Jackson, sharing a meal, imagining a future that might include more mornings like this. "Tell me about yourself," she said eventually. "Where are you from? What brought you to Wyoming?" Jackson smiled, clearly pleased by her interest. "I grew up in Texas, on a small ranch outside San Antonio. My father was a cowboy, moved from place to place looking for work. My mother was the daughter of a local rancher. They met, fell in love, got married despite her family's objections. He was not good enough for her in their eyes, but they loved each other, and they made it work." "That sounds romantic." "It was, from what I remember. My mother died when I was 12. Influenza took her one winter. My father never really recovered. He kept working, kept moving, but the heart went out of him. He died 3 years ago. Just did not wake up one morning. The doctor said his heart gave out, but I think he just decided he was ready to be with my mother again." Clara reached across the table and touched his hand. "I am so sorry. Losing both parents is hard." "It was, but it also taught me something important. Life is short. Love, real love, is precious. When you find it, you hold onto it with both hands, and you do not let go. My parents had less than 20 years together, but those years were full of joy. I would rather have a short life full of love than a long life of loneliness." His words resonated deep in Clara's chest. She had watched her father grieve her mother for years after her death. She had seen how the loss had diminished him, how he had poured all his love into the ranch and into Clara because he had no one else. She did not want to end up like that, alone and grieving for possibilities never explored. "I understand," she said. "After my father died, I threw myself into the ranch because I did not know what else to do. But being alone is hard, harder than I expected." "You do not have to be alone anymore," Jackson said, turning his hand palm up to clasp hers. "Not if you do not want to be." They sat like that, hands linked across the table, while the restaurant bustled around them. Clara felt something settling in her chest, some tension she had been carrying for months easing. This was right. Jackson was right. She did not know how she knew it so quickly, but she did. Sometimes, you just knew. They finished their breakfast and stepped back out into the sunshine. The town was busier now, wagons and horses moving up and down the main street, people going about their morning business. Clara saw several familiar faces and noted the curious glances directed at her and Jackson. Let them look, she thought. Let them see that Clara Hartwell was not alone, that she had someone strong and capable standing beside her. Sheriff Bridger found them before they left town. He was walking quickly, his expression serious, and Clara's stomach clenched with apprehension. "Miss Hartwell, Mr. Cole," he said, slightly out of breath. "I have talked to Carl Brennan. Took some convincing, but he has agreed to make a full statement implicating Silas McCready in the sabotage of your ranch. He is angry enough at McCready to cooperate, and I have offered him a deal on the charges in exchange for his testimony." Relief flooded through Clara. "That is wonderful news. Thank you, Sheriff. I am heading out to the McCready ranch now to confront Silas. Given the nature of the accusations, I thought you might want to be present when I question him. You are entitled to face your accuser, so to speak." Clara looked at Jackson, who nodded encouragingly. "I think you should go," he said. "I will come with you if you want." "I do want that," Clara said. Then, to Sheriff Bridger, We will come with you." The three of them rode out to the McCready Ranch, a sprawling operation that dwarfed Clara's modest spread. Silas McCready had been successful. She had to give him that. His herds were large and healthy, his buildings well-maintained, his fences sturdy. But all that success had apparently not been enough. He had wanted more, wanted her land, and had been willing to break the law to get it. They found McCready in his ranch yard, overseeing some repair work on a barn. He was a big man, tall and broad with iron-gray hair and cold blue eyes. He looked up as they approached, and Clara saw calculation flash across his face as he registered the sheriff's presence. "Sheriff Bridger," he said, his voice booming and falsely jovial. "To what do I owe the pleasure? And Miss Hartwell, Mr. Cole, this is quite the delegation." "We need to talk, Silas," Sheriff Bridger said, his tone formal. "In private, if possible." McCready's expression shifted, became more guarded. "Of course. Let us step into my office." They followed him into the ranch house, a large, well-appointed building that spoke of money and power. His office was lined with bookshelves and hunting trophies, a massive desk dominating the center of the room. McCready settled into the chair behind the desk like a king on a throne, but Sheriff Bridger remained standing, forcing McCready to look up at him. "I have received some serious allegations against you, Silas," the sheriff said without preamble. "Carl Brennan has made a statement claiming you paid him to sabotage the Hartwell Ranch, specifically to open the south pasture gate and let the cattle scatter. He says you promised him money and a job in exchange for causing enough trouble to force Miss Hartwell to sell her land to you." McCready's face went through several interesting transformations: shock, anger, calculation, and finally a sort of bluff indignation. "That is ridiculous. Carl Brennan is a drunk and a liar. You cannot possibly believe his word over mine." "I might not, except that there are multiple witnesses who heard Carl describe the sabotage in detail, and the physical evidence supports his story. The lock was picked, Silas. Someone deliberately opened that gate. Miss Hartwell did not leave it open through carelessness. Even if Carl did sabotage the gate, that does not mean I had anything to do with it." McCready blustered. "The man is Jake Brennan's brother, and Jake works for me, but that does not make me responsible for Carl's actions. Carl says you met with him personally. He says you gave him specific instructions and promised him payment. He is willing to testify to that under oath." McCready's face was turning red, a vein pulsing in his temple. "It is my word against his, a respected rancher against a disgruntled drunk. Who do you think people will believe?" "I think people will believe the evidence," Sheriff Bridger said calmly, "and I think a jury will find Carl's testimony credible, especially with the physical evidence and the witnesses to support it. But here is what I'm offering you, Silas. You can come clean now, admit what you did, and maybe we can work out a deal. Restitution to Miss Hartwell, a fine, some community service. Or you can fight this, and we take it to trial, and if you are convicted, you are looking at jail time and the complete destruction of your reputation." The silence in the room was thick and heavy. Clara watched McCready struggle with himself, pride warring with pragmatism. Finally, he seemed to deflate, the bluster draining out of him. "I never meant for things to go this far," he said, his voice lower now, almost defeated. "I just wanted to pressure her into selling. The ranch was struggling. I thought if things got bad enough, she would take my offer and everyone would win." "Except me," Clara said, speaking for the first time since entering the room. Her voice was hard, cold with anger. "I would have lost my father's legacy, my home, everything that matters to me, and you did not care about that at all." McCready looked at her, and she saw something shift in his expression. Shame, maybe, or at least a belated recognition of the harm he had caused. "I am sorry," he said, though the words sounded hollow. "You are right. I was only thinking about what I wanted. I did not consider what it would cost you." "Sorry does not fix the damage you did," Clara said. "Sorry does not make up for the accusations, the doubt, the mess I had to clean up because of your greed." "No, it does not," Sheriff Bridger agreed. "Which is why Silas is going to make this right. He is going to pay restitution for all the costs you incurred dealing with the scattered cattle. He is going to make a public statement clearing your name and admitting his role in the sabotage, and he is going to pay a fine to the county for criminal conspiracy. If he does all that, we might be able to avoid a trial." McCready looked like he wanted to argue, but the fight had gone out of him. He nodded slowly. "I will do it, whatever it takes." "Good," the sheriff said. "I will draw up the paperwork. You have got 1 week to make the restitution payment to Miss Hartwell." They left the McCready Ranch shortly after, and Clara felt like she was floating. It was over. The truth was out. Her name was cleared. Justice had been served. Jackson rode close beside her as they made their way back toward the Hartwell Ranch, leaving Sheriff Bridger to return to town. The afternoon sun was warm on their shoulders, and Clara felt lighter than she had in months. "You did it," Jackson said, pride clear in his voice. "You stood up for yourself, and you won." "We did it," Clara corrected. "I could not have done any of this without you, Jackson. You believed me when no one else did. You helped me find the truth. You stood beside me every step of the way." "That is what partners do," Jackson said simply. Partners. The word resonated through Clara's chest. Yes, that was what they were becoming. Partners in more than just solving a crime, partners in building a life. They reached the boundary between the McCready Ranch and Clara's property, and Jackson reined his horse to a stop. Clara stopped beside him, curious. "There is something I want to say," Jackson began, his voice suddenly nervous in a way she had not heard before. "I know we have only known each other 3 days. I know that is not very long. But Clara, these have been the most important 3 days of my life. You have shown me who you are, your strength, your integrity, your determination, and I have fallen in love with you." Clara's breath caught in her throat. Her heart pounded so hard, she thought he must be able to hear it. "I am not asking you to say it back," Jackson continued quickly. "I know you might need more time, but I needed you to know how I feel. I love you, Clara Hartwell, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving to you that loving me back would be a good decision." For a moment, Clara could not speak. Emotions overwhelmed her, joy and fear and love. So much love, welling up from some deep place in her heart she had thought closed forever after her father's death. "Jackson," she whispered, "I do not need more time. I have known since yesterday morning, when you looked at me in that barn and believed me without question. I love you too. It is fast and it is crazy and it does not make logical sense, but I do not care. I love you." His face transformed, joy lighting him up from the inside. He dismounted in one smooth motion and reached up to help her down from her horse. The moment her feet touched the ground, he pulled her into his arms, and Clara went willingly, wrapping her arms around his neck and holding on tight. "Say it again," he murmured against her hair. "I love you," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "I love you, Jackson Cole." He pulled back just enough to look at her face, his hands cupping her cheeks with infinite gentleness. "I am going to kiss you now, if that is all right with you." "It is more than all right," Clara breathed. His lips met hers in a kiss that was everything Clara had imagined and more. Gentle but passionate, sweet but hungry, full of promise and hope and love. She melted into him, into the kiss, feeling like she had finally come home after a long, lonely journey. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jackson rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he said. "I know it is too soon. I know we should wait, but I do not want to wait. I want to start our life together now." Clara should have been shocked. She should have protested that it was indeed too soon, that they needed more time to be sensible and careful. But she did not feel sensible. She felt gloriously, wonderfully reckless. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." Jackson laughed, a sound of pure joy, and spun her around, her feet lifting off the ground. When he set her down again, he kissed her once more, sealing the promise they had just made to each other. They rode the rest of the way to the Hartwell Ranch in a state of euphoria, making plans and dreaming out loud. They would marry soon as arrangements could be made. Jackson would move to the Hartwell Ranch, and they would run it together, combining their skills and resources. Eventually, if Jackson's boss at the Rocking M was willing, they might be able to purchase some additional land and expand the operation. When they arrived at the ranch, Clara invited Jackson inside for the first time. The house was small and modest compared to the McCready mansion, but it was clean and comfortable and full of memories of her father. She found herself nervous, wanting Jackson to like it, to see it as a home they could share. He walked through the rooms slowly, taking everything in. He stopped in the kitchen, running his hand along the worn wooden table where Clara and her father had shared countless meals. "This is a good house," he said finally. "It has heart. We can build a life here." "We can," Clara agreed, coming to stand beside him. and maybe, eventually, fill it with children. Jackson turned to her, his eyes bright with emotion. I would like that. A family. With you. They spent the rest of the afternoon together, sitting on the porch and watching the sun go down over the ranch land. They talked about everything and nothing, learning the details of each other's lives, their hopes and dreams and fears. Clara told him about her mother, who had died when Clara was young, about how much she still missed her father. Jackson told her about his wandering childhood, about the loneliness of being adrift after his parents died, about how finding her felt like finally discovering where he belonged. As darkness fell, Jackson reluctantly prepared to leave. It would not be proper for him to stay the night, not until they were married. But he was clearly as reluctant to go as Clara was to see him leave. I will be back tomorrow, he promised, holding her close in the doorway. And every day after that. You are not alone anymore, Clara, not ever again. I know, she said, standing on her toes to kiss him one more time. And Jackson, thank you for finding the truth, for clearing my name, for loving me. Thank you for letting me, he replied. She watched him ride away into the darkness, but this time there was no ache of loneliness, because she knew he would be back. This was not goodbye. It was just good night. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity and happiness. Sheriff Bridger made good on his word, ensuring that Silas McCready paid full restitution and made a public statement admitting his role in the sabotage. The news spread quickly through the territory, and Clara found her reputation not just restored, but enhanced. People who had doubted her now went out of their way to express their support. Neighboring ranchers who had been standoffish now made friendly overtures. Jackson was a constant presence at the Hartwell Ranch, coming over every day after finishing his work at the Rocking M. He helped with repairs, worked with the cattle, and gradually won over the skeptical ranch hands with his competence and easygoing nature. Even Dutch Morrison, who had been so quick to blame Clara for the open gate, came to respect and appreciate Jackson's contributions. Clara and Jackson set a wedding date for early December, giving themselves enough time to make arrangements, but not so long that they had to wait forever. Clara had no female relatives to help with preparations, but several women from town rallied around her, delighted at the romance and eager to contribute to the celebration. Maggie from the restaurant offered to make the wedding cake. The minister's wife helped Clara alter her mother's old wedding dress, a beautiful ivory silk that had been carefully preserved in a trunk. Jackson's boss at the Rocking M, a gruff but kind-hearted man named Frank Murphy, gave Jackson his blessing and even offered a generous wedding gift, a breeding bull that would help improve the Hartwell herd. It was a magnificent gesture, one that spoke to the respect Jackson had earned during his time working for the ranch. As the wedding day approached, Clara found herself marveling at how much her life had changed in such a short time. 2 months ago, she had been alone, struggling, falsely accused, and fighting to save her ranch. Now she was surrounded by friends and support, her name cleared, and about to marry the man she loved. The night before the wedding, Jackson came to the ranch for a final pre-marriage visit. They sat on the porch together, bundled in blankets against the cold December air, watching the stars and talking quietly. Are you nervous? Jackson asked, his arm warm around her shoulders. No, Clara said truthfully. I am excited. I cannot wait to be your wife. I cannot wait to be your husband, to wake up next to you every morning, to build this life together. Do you have any doubts? Clara asked. Any second thoughts about marrying someone you have known for such a short time? Jackson was quiet for a moment, considering. No doubts, he said finally. Not a single one. I know my own heart, Clara. And I know you. Maybe we have not had years to court, but we have had intensity. We have been through a crisis together. I have seen who you are when things are hard, and that tells me more than years of easy courting ever could. I feel the same way, Clara admitted, and I think my father would have liked you. He always said the measure of a man was how he acted when times were tough. You have proven yourself 100 times over. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, content just to be together. Finally, Jackson stirred, knowing he needed to leave and let Clara get her rest before the big day. I should go, he said reluctantly. Next time I see you, you will be walking down the aisle toward me. Clara turned in his arms and kissed him, trying to pour all her love and anticipation into the gesture. I love you, Jackson Cole. I love you too, Clara Hartwell, soon to be Clara Cole. The wedding day dawned clear and cold, the Wyoming sky a brilliant blue. Clara woke early, nerves and excitement making sleep impossible. The minister's wife and several other women arrived mid-morning to help her prepare, fussing over her hair and dress and chattering excitedly about the ceremony. The wedding was to be held in the small church in Clearwater, with a reception afterward at Maggie's restaurant. It was not a grand affair, but it was perfect for Clara and Jackson, intimate and heartfelt with the people who mattered most to them. When Clara arrived at the church in a borrowed wagon driven by Dutch Morrison, who had gruffly volunteered to give her away in the absence of her father, she found it packed with people. Neighbors, friends, ranch hands, townspeople, all gathered to witness and celebrate their union. And at the front, standing beside the minister and looking impossibly handsome in a new black suit, was Jackson. Their eyes met across the church, and Clara saw her own emotions reflected in his face: love, joy, certainty. This was right. This was meant to be. Dutch offered her his arm and walked her down the aisle. Clara barely registered the faces of the guests, her attention focused entirely on Jackson. When she reached the front of the church and Dutch placed her hand in Jackson's, she felt a sense of completion, like a puzzle piece finally sliding into place. The ceremony itself passed in a blur. Clara heard herself reciting vows, heard Jackson's voice strong and clear as he promised to love and cherish her for the rest of his life. She felt him slide a simple gold band onto her finger, felt her own hands trembling as she placed a matching ring on his hand. And then the minister was pronouncing them husband and wife, and Jackson was kissing her, and the church erupted in applause and cheers. They walked back down the aisle together, husband and wife, and Clara felt like she was floating. This was happiness, pure, uncomplicated, overwhelming happiness. The reception at Maggie's was a joyful chaos of food and music and dancing. Clara and Jackson moved through it in a happy daze, accepting congratulations and toasts, eating cake and dancing to the fiddle music provided by a local musician. At one point, Clara found herself standing with Jackson in a quiet corner, watching the celebration swirl around them. "Happy?" Jackson asked, pulling her close. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Clara replied honestly. "You have given me everything, Jackson. Love, partnership, a future. I do not know how I got so lucky." "I am the lucky one," Jackson insisted. "You are remarkable, Clara, strong and brave and beautiful. I am going to spend the rest of my life trying to deserve you." "You already deserve me," Clara said, reaching up to cup his face. "You have from the moment you believed me about that gate. You saw me, really saw me, when everyone else was ready to write me off. That is a gift I will never forget." They left the reception as evening fell, riding together back to the ranch that was now truly theirs, not just Clara's, but theirs together. The house looked warm and welcoming, with lamplight glowing in the windows, Dutch and the other hands having discreetly made themselves scarce for the night to give the newlyweds privacy. Inside, Jackson built up the fire, while Clara changed out of her wedding dress into a simple nightgown. When she emerged from the bedroom, she found Jackson waiting for her, his suit jacket and tie removed, his shirt unbuttoned at the collar. He looked at her with such love and desire that she felt her breath catch. "Come here, wife," he said softly. Clara went to him, stepping into his arms, and knew she was finally, truly home. The first months of married life were an adjustment, but a joyful one. Clara and Jackson settled into a rhythm of working together on the ranch, their skills complementing each other perfectly. Jackson's experience with cattle and his way with horses proved invaluable, while Clara's knowledge of the land and her careful management of resources kept them financially stable. Together, they were far stronger than either had been alone. They faced challenges, of course. The winter was hard, with heavy snows and bitter cold that tested both their endurance and their supplies. Several head of cattle were lost to the weather, and there were times when money was so tight that Clara lay awake worrying. But through it all, they had each other. Jackson's steady optimism balanced Clara's tendency to worry, while her careful planning kept them from making rash decisions during difficult times. Spring brought relief and renewal. The snow melted, the grass grew green, and the cattle that had survived the winter thrived in the warmer weather. Clara and Jackson worked from dawn to dusk, repairing winter damage, preparing for calving season, and slowly but steadily improving the ranch. It was in late spring that Clara realized she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks, but when her monthly courses failed to appear for the third time, she knew for certain. The realization filled her with a mixture of joy and terror. She wanted children, wanted to build a family with Jackson, but the timing felt precarious. They were still establishing themselves, still working to make the ranch truly profitable. A baby would complicate everything. But when she told Jackson that evening, his reaction left no room for doubt about how he felt. His face lit up with pure joy, and he swept her into his arms with a whoop of delight. "A baby," he breathed, his hand coming to rest gently on her still flat stomach. "Clara, we are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" she asked, needing to hear him say it. Happy does not begin to cover it. I am thrilled, overjoyed. This is everything I wanted. A wife I love, a ranch we are building together, and now a child. Clara, you have given me the world. His enthusiasm eased Clara's worries. They would figure it out, she realized. They would make it work because they were partners, and partners supported each other through challenges. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the summer and into the fall. Clara continued working on the ranch as long as she was able, though Jackson became increasingly protective as her belly grew. He took on more of the heavy labor, insisting she rest more, bringing her water and food, and generally fussing over her in a way that was both endearing and occasionally frustrating. "I am pregnant, not fragile," Clara protested one afternoon when Jackson insisted she stop repairing a fence and go sit in the shade. "I know that," Jackson said, guiding her gently toward the porch. "But you are carrying our child, and I will be damned if I let anything happen to either of you, because I was too stubborn to make you rest." Clara could not really argue with that logic, especially when he said it with such heartfelt concern. So she rested and let him take care of her, and felt grateful beyond measure for a husband who loved her so completely. Their son was born on a cold January night in 1885, after a labor that lasted nearly 15 hours. The local midwife, a competent woman named Mrs. Henderson, attended the birth, with Jackson pacing anxiously in the next room. When the baby finally arrived, howling lustily and red-faced, Mrs. Henderson cleaned him up and placed him in Clara's arms. "You have got a fine, healthy boy," she said with satisfaction. "Good size, good lungs. He's going to be a handful." Clara looked down at her son, overwhelmed with love so fierce it almost hurt. He was perfect, with a shock of dark hair like Jackson's and tiny fingers that gripped her thumb with surprising strength. "Jackson," she called, her voice hoarse from labor. "Come meet your son." Jackson appeared in the doorway, his face pale and anxious. But when he saw Clara holding the baby, when he crossed the room and looked down at his child for the first time, his expression transformed into wonder. "He is beautiful," Jackson whispered. "Clara, he is perfect. Would you like to hold him?" Jackson nodded, unable to speak. Clara placed the baby carefully in his arms, and she watched her strong, capable husband turn to mush. He cradled the tiny body with infinite gentleness, tears streaming down his face unashamedly. "Hello, little one," Jackson murmured. "I am your papa, and I promise you I am going to love you and protect you and give you the best life I can. You are the most precious thing in the world to me, you and your mama." They named him Samuel after Clara's father. Little Sam thrived, growing quickly and showing signs of inheriting his father's easy temperament and his mother's determination. The ranch thrived too, with the addition of Murphy's bull improving the herd quality significantly. By the time Sam was walking, the Hartwell Ranch, which everyone now called the Cole Hartwell Ranch, was turning a steady profit. Jackson proved to be a devoted father, spending every spare moment with Sam. He carved wooden toys, took the boy on gentle horse rides even before Sam could walk properly, and read to him every night from the few books the family owned. Watching them together, Clara felt her heart swell with contentment. This was what she had dreamed of without even knowing it, a family built on love and respect, a partnership that enriched both their lives. 2 years after Sam's birth, Clara became pregnant again. This time, it was a daughter, born in the spring of 1887 with her mother's dark eyes and a surprisingly loud cry for such a tiny thing. They named her Rose, after the old mare who had carried Clara faithfully for so many years and had finally passed away peacefully the previous winter. With 2 young children and a growing ranch, life was busy and sometimes chaotic. But it was also full of joy and laughter and love. Clara would often pause in her work to watch Jackson playing with the children, or to see Sam carefully helping his little sister learn to walk, and she would marvel at how far they had come from that terrible morning when she had been falsely accused. The years passed in a pleasant blur. Sam grew into a sturdy, responsible boy who loved working with the cattle and showed every sign of becoming an excellent rancher. Rose was spirited and clever, with a gift for gentling horses that amazed everyone. The ranch continued to prosper, allowing Clara and Jackson to expand their holdings and improve their home. They added rooms to the house as the family grew, built a new barn, and invested in better breeding stock. The Cole Hartwell Ranch became known throughout the territory for the quality of its cattle and the integrity of its owners. Clara and Jackson built friendships with their neighbors, including a reconciled relationship with Silas McCready, who had become a humbler, more decent man after his disgrace and punishment. Dutch Morrison became like family, a beloved uncle to Sam and Rose who taught them skills their parents did not have, and told them stories about their grandfather Samuel. The ranch hands who had once doubted Clara now showed her nothing but respect, and several of them had been with the family long enough to watch Sam and Rose grow from infants to capable young helpers. When Sam was 10 and Rose was 8, Clara found herself pregnant again, much to everyone's surprise. This pregnancy was harder than the first two, and Clara was confined to bed rest for the last 2 months. Jackson was beside himself with worry, hardly sleeping as he tried to manage the ranch, care for the older children, and watch over Clara. But their third child, another boy they named Thomas after Jackson's father, arrived safely in the fall of 1895. He was smaller than his siblings had been, but healthy and strong-willed from the start. Sam and Rose were enchanted with their baby brother, fighting over who got to hold him and help care for him. Clara recovered slowly from Thomas's birth, and she and Jackson quietly agreed that 3 children were enough. They had been blessed beyond measure, and it was time to focus on raising the children they had and continuing to build the ranch that would be their legacy. By the turn of the century, the Cole Hartwell Ranch was one of the most successful operations in the territory. Sam, now 15, worked alongside his parents with the skill and dedication of a much older man. Rose, 13, had started a small horse breeding program that was already showing promise. And Thomas, 5 years old and full of mischief, kept everyone on their toes with his boundless energy and curiosity. Clara and Jackson, now in their late 30s, had aged well. The hard work of ranch life had kept them strong and healthy, and the love between them had only deepened with time. They still sat on the porch together in the evenings, watching the sun set over the land they had built together, talking about the day and making plans for the future. "Do you remember when we first met?" Clara asked one evening, her hand in Jackson's, as they watched the children playing in the yard. "When you rode up to tell me about the cattle and found me being accused of leaving that gate open?" "I remember," Jackson said, smiling at the memory. "I took one look at you and knew my life was about to change. I thought you were going to ride away and leave me to deal with it alone, but you stayed. You believed me. You helped me find the truth." "Of course I stayed. How could I not? You were magnificent, Clara, dignified and strong even when everyone was against you. I fell in love with you that first day, though I did not realize it until later." "And now look at us," Clara said, gesturing to the ranch, the children, the life they had built. 16 years married, 3 children, a successful ranch. I never imagined my life could be this good." "Neither did I," Jackson admitted. "After my parents died, I thought I would just drift through life, working where I could, never really belonging anywhere. But then I found you. You gave me a home, Clara, a family, a purpose. Everything I have, everything I am, is because you loved me." "We loved each other," Clara corrected gently. "This was not one person saving the other. This was 2 people finding each other at exactly the right moment and building something beautiful together." Jackson pulled her close and kissed her temple. "You are right, partners from the start, partners forever," Clara agreed. They sat in comfortable silence, watching as Sam showed Thomas how to throw a rope, while Rose practiced jumps on her favorite mare. The evening air was sweet with the scent of prairie grass and wildflowers. In the distance, cattle lowed contentedly. It was a perfect moment, ordinary in its domesticity, but extraordinary in its peace and contentment. Clara thought back to that terrible morning 16 years ago when she had been accused of negligence, when her world had seemed to be crumbling around her. She thought about the fear and anger and desperation she had felt, and then she thought about Jackson riding into her life at precisely the moment she needed him most, about how he had found the truth and cleared her name, but more importantly, how he had seen her, truly seen her, and loved what he saw. That moment of crisis had led to everything good in her life now. Without the false accusation, without the sabotage gate, she might never have met Jackson. They might have remained neighbors who nodded politely in passing, but never really knew each other. The thought was sobering. Sometimes, Clara reflected, the worst moments of our lives lead us to the best things. Sometimes what feels like disaster is actually destiny arranging itself. "What are you thinking about?" Jackson asked, noticing her faraway expression. "Just how grateful I am," Clara said. "For all of it. Even the hard parts, because they led me here. To you. To this life." "I am grateful too," Jackson said. "Every single day, I wake up and thank God for the cattle that got through the fence, because investigating that brought me to you." Clara laughed, the irony not lost on her. "We should probably not tell people that we are grateful for criminal sabotage." "Probably not," Jackson agreed, grinning. "But it is true nonetheless. Best thing that ever happened to me, that opened gate." As darkness fell and the children reluctantly came inside for supper, Clara and Jackson lingered on the porch for one more moment. The first stars were appearing in the vast Wyoming sky, and the air was cooling rapidly as it always did in the high plains. "I love you, Jackson Cole," Clara said, the words as true and heartfelt as they had been 16 years ago when she first spoke them. "I love you too, Clara Cole," Jackson replied. "Today, tomorrow, and forever." They went inside together, into the warmth and light and laughter of the home they had built, the family they had created. Behind them, the ranch stretched out in the darkness, the land they had worked and loved and passed down to their children. It was a legacy built on love and partnership, on trust and determination, on two people who had found each other at exactly the right moment and chosen to build a life together. The cattle were secure in their pastures, the fences were strong and well-maintained, and the gates were locked tight. But more importantly, Clara and Jackson were secure in their love, their family, and the life they had created together. That was the real legacy, the one that would endure long after the fences fell and the cattle were gone. Love, family, partnership. These were the things that mattered. These were the things that lasted. And as Clara tucked her children into bed that night, as she kissed their foreheads and whispered goodnight, as she returned to her own room, where Jackson was waiting for her with open arms, she knew with absolute certainty that she was blessed beyond measure. The girl who had been blamed when the cattle got through the fence had found not just vindication, but love, partnership, and a happiness so complete it sometimes took her breath away. The cowboy had found the real culprit by morning, but more importantly, he had found his soulmate, his partner, the love of his life, and Clara had found the same. Together, they had built something beautiful and lasting. Together, they had created a legacy that would endure for generations. It was a love story that had begun with crisis and accusation, but had blossomed into something extraordinary. And every day for the rest of their lives, Clara and Jackson would be grateful for that fateful October morning in 1883, when their paths had crossed and their futures had become forever intertwined. The end.